Imagine you just gave birth and someone tells you, no air conditioning, no showers, and keep your socks on. Well, that sounds less like recovery and more like a torture. But in Korea, China, and many parts of the world, this is considered the golden rule for postpartum recovery. So, is the rest of the world just stuck in the past? Or is America missing something crucial about recovery after childbirth? Today, I'm breaking down the logic behind this tradition. What are the parts that are actually grounded in physiology? What are the parts that are outdated? And how can you adapt these ideas to modern life without blindly following old rules? By the end of this video, you'll understand why keeping warm is about way more than just temperature. Once you understand the framework behind it, you'll be able to look at your own symptoms or lack of them and make a more informed decision about what your body actually needs for better recovery. I'm a licensed Korean medicine doctor from South Korea, where Korean medicine is part of the national healthcare licensing system. That matters in this conversation because a lot of Korean postpartum care practices are built around the knowledge of Korean medicine. I'm also a medical anthropologist. I look at how different cultures understand the body and how those ideas shape their healing systems. And from that perspective, one thing becomes really interesting. Different postpartum practices exist across different cultures, and yet, some patterns are strikingly similar. One of them is the idea of keeping the postpartum body warm. You see versions of it in East Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, Latin America, parts of Africa. Many of these places have hot summers, some are warm all year round, and yet the same rule keeps showing up. Stay warm, avoid cold exposure, protect the recovering body. As absurd as this may sound on the surface, something tells you there must be a real reason why so many cultures have this particular practice regardless of the weather. And why is America left out? Different cultures developed different explanations, rituals, foods, and the recovery systems around childbirth. But the biological realities are universal. The uterus shrinking after delivery is universal. Postpartum bleeding is universal. Sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, hormonal shift, breast changes, emotional vulnerability. These are the biological experiences every woman goes through after childbirth. But the interpretation may be different. Social expectations are not the same depending on where she lives and what she believes. But when the same practice appears independently across different cultures, it's hard to dismiss it as a coincidence or some kind of shared superstition. The practice of keeping the body warm after childbirth is one that shows up quite consistently throughout many cultures. Like there's almost certainly something biological in it, or at least worth investigating the reason behind. So let's dig into it. For most of human history, childbirth was genuinely life-threatening. Women commonly died from hemorrhage, infection, or sheer physical exhaustion. And unlike today, there were no blood transfusion, no medications to rapidly contract the uterus, no emergency C-sections. If severe bleeding happened after delivery, women often died. And if she survived, I want to say that again, if she survived, major blood loss had predictable effects on the body. Circulating blood volume drops, blood pressure falls, the body starts pulling resources inward to protect the vital organs. One of the first things affected is the body's ability to generate and maintain heat. Women who lost significant blood after childbirth weren't just weak, they were also cold. And that coldness made everything much more complicated for the body that was already struggling. Now imagine the conditions people lived in. No insulated homes, no central heating, no hot showers, no hair dryers. If you washed your hair, you stay wet and cold. Even in hot climates, showers can drop body temperature surprisingly fast, especially in someone already depleted from childbirth. These were the original threats in a world without indoor temperature control and modern obstetric care. Losing body heat could genuinely worsen an already dangerous situation. So, these rules emerged. Stay inside, eat warm food, avoid cold exposure, protect the recovering body, because they were responding to a very real physiological vulnerability. Sadly, much of the world is still living without access to modern obstetric care, insulated homes, hot running water, and electricity. I lived in Africa in 2000s and had to fetch water from the village well to shower. So, there are still places where these precautions remain valid. But at the same time, I also spent most of my life in South Korea, a country with advanced medical care and modern living. And interestingly, these traditions still persist, not as rigidly as before, but they haven't disappeared entirely. The modern critique is right. The world these traditions were built for no longer exists, at least in Korea. Modern obstetric care dramatically reduced the dangers that made childbirth so risky in the first place. Excessive blood loss can happen, and it's still serious, but it's far less likely to become fatal in modern medical settings. Most people also live in insulated homes with heating, hot water, electricity, and temperature control. So yes, some traditional rules absolutely need to evolve. And a lot of new mothers already know that. If these traditions still survive today, that's partly because of people like my mom. My mom is never someone who tells me what to do and wants to control. When I took a leave of absence from college to volunteer in Africa for a year, she respected my decision. When I came back dressing extremely unconventional by Korean standards, she never told me to change, though I'm pretty sure she wanted to throw everything away behind my back. And yet, after I had my first baby, she nagged me for not wearing socks inside the house. I had given birth at the end of May, and yes, New York mornings and evenings can be a little cool then, but it was absolutely not cold enough in the house to warrant socks. Besides, I'd been wearing them for days and I just needed a break. Still, she nagged. I get it. She was looking out for me. But beyond overprotective moms and cultural habits, the real question is this: is there still any meaningful physiological relevance behind these practices today? The answer is yes, but not in the extreme way traditional rules sometimes suggest. Why? Modern obstetric care handles the acute crisis. What it doesn't fully address is what's happening in your body in the weeks or months after discharge, even after an uncomplicated delivery. Even when your labs look completely normal, childbirth still places enormous stress on the body. A vaginal birth typically involves 500 milliliters of blood loss, or slightly less, about this much. A C-section is roughly double that, and postpartum bleeding continues for weeks afterwards. Layer on top of that, the massive physical toll of labor, sleep deprivation, hormonal shift, and the constant demands of newborn care. The body is profoundly drained even when your labs look normal. Blood loss and the subsequent energy loss isn't counted in them. Many postpartum women already know exactly what that feels like. Not necessarily sick, not necessarily an emergency, but not fully normal either. This is the context where some traditional postpartum practices may still hold value. Not because cold air is inherently dangerous, but because reducing unnecessary physical stress can genuinely help a body that is already exhausted and recovering. What are the specific symptoms? One common experience is spontaneous sweating. Part of this is hormonal. After delivery, estrogen and progesterone levels drop dramatically, affecting the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is the brain's temperature regulation center. So, postpartum women often sweat easily, then suddenly feel chilled afterward as the sweat evaporates. Joint sensitivity is another common experience. Some women notice this very specifically. Their knees suddenly ache in an aggressively air-conditioned grocery store. Their wrists hurt more after carrying the baby. One shoulder feels unusually sensitive to cold air, even when the rest of the body feels completely fine. If you've experienced this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It happens because peripheral circulation is reduced and less blood is reaching the extremities and joints, and they become more sensitive to cold exposure. Then there's the dizziness, the brain fog, and that strange feeling of not quite being fully recovered. You can have perfectly normal postpartum labs and still feel physically depleted. Medicine is very good at identifying emergencies, but recovery is bigger than simply surviving childbirth safely. And this is where listening to symptoms still matters. So, when traditional cultures said, stay warm, rest, avoid cold exposure, Part of what they may have been doing was simply reducing additional stress on the body that was already working hard to recover. Now, the surprising thing is you could be experiencing all of this even without anemia. Your hemoglobin level looks fine. But here's the thing. Hemoglobin measures concentration, amount of iron containing protein per unit of blood. It doesn't tell you how much blood you actually have. So, even after significant blood loss that is still under the clinical threshold, if the ratio within the remaining blood is normal, your result reads normal. The blood work is meaningful, but it doesn't guarantee that you are not depleted. It's your symptoms that you should listen to. If your recovery has been smooth, your symptoms are minimal, and you feel well, like genuinely well, you probably do not need rigid postpartum restrictions. You do not need to fear showers. You do not need to panic over air conditioning. You do not need to perform traditions just to prove that you respect them. But if you're experiencing clear signs of depletion, sweating, feeling chilled afterward, joint achiness, dizziness, exhaustion that feels deeper than just being tired, then reducing unnecessary thermal stress can definitely help you recover. And this doesn't have to be extreme. It can simply mean avoiding sudden temperature shifts, not sitting directly under blasting AC, not staying in wet clothes or wet hair, because evaporative cooling is real, even in a warm climate. When I was volunteering in Angola, I showered using cold well water. My body temperature dropped almost instantly. And once the sun went down, the air became surprisingly cool. In that kind of environment, protecting new mothers from cold exposure makes complete sense. Warm food can be understood in a similar way. Warm meals and warm environments may simply feel easier on a body that is already exhausted, sleep deprived, and recovering from childbirth. What I want you to take from this video is a framework, not a rule book. Traditional postpartum practices were not created randomly. They came from generations of observing what happened to women's bodies after childbirth and trying to respond to those patterns. Modern medicine solved some of the original dangers these traditions were responding to. That's probably part of why America never developed them in the same way. But even in America, there are new mothers who are more vulnerable than their labs suggest and who struggle to recover. Cleared for discharge is not the same as fully recovered. This holds true wherever you are, no matter how advanced medicine, no matter how strong you think you are. So, listen to your body. If the symptoms are there, some of these practices may still make sense for you. If they're not, you don't need to follow traditions rigidly out of obligation or fear. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the one thing every Korean mom considers as the baseline of postpartum recovery. Regardless of how much she knows about recovery, she knows this one thing and takes it very seriously. Postpartum centers run programs for it. Meal plans are built around it. Exercise and massages designed with that in mind. It's practically a given in Korean postpartum culture, and it has everything to do with how you heal, both short-term and long-term. And it's squarely in my domain as a Korean medicine doctor. As always, I promise I'll bring it to you through an anthropological lens, so whether you've never heard of Korean postpartum care or you already know a thing or two, it is going to be clear, practical, relevant, and applicable to your real life. If you want to be the first one to watch it as soon as it's out, please subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next video.